Welcome to Coronavirus Impact. I'm Larry Casper. We have on the phone Vince Galko, Senior Vice President at Mercury Public Relations. Welcome to our program.
Hi, Larry. Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Lawmakers have agreed to postpone Pennsylvania's primary. If we had gone ahead with it, what were the potential problems?
Well, I think any time you deal with an election, whether it's primary or general election, you want to make sure you have as much participation as possible. It's not a partisan issue. It's certainly a bipartisan issue. We want to have as much turnout as possible. So I think the number one concern, obviously, is the health and safety of the voters. But the second concern is making sure that it's an environment where we have as much participation as possible. So any hint of people not wanting to come out because they're scared of the virus or other issues would detract from that. So I think it was the right decision to postpone it.
So, Vince, what kind of information did lawmakers cite, medical or otherwise, to support their decision?
Well, I think it's numerous things, whether it was the CDC's instructions of not having events of more than 10 or 50 people, depending on the venue, at one time. The guidance coming out where this thing may last several more weeks, so maybe the surge part of it is perhaps coming to an end at the end of this week, but certainly the virus itself will remain. All of those factors, and in addition to just the human factor of wanting to make sure people feel safe and confident in doing this, was the right call. So do we know if there was any resistance from potential polling places to have the primary on the 28th of April as scheduled? I haven't heard anybody as far as speaking out against it, but I think more as a logistical issue. If you have schools or public buildings closed, it certainly would have created some problems for election workers and counties to start setting up and preparing for this. I think we're all hoping as Pennsylvanians that by April 28th we'll be back to business as normal. But I think there's also part of us that realizes that may not happen, or at least not 100% back to normal. So why add to the stress and confusion of these administrators and county officials any more than we have to?
Did we get any input from potential poll workers? Have they been showing any reservations about having the primary on April 28th?
Yeah, I think most people, whether it's poll workers or just any public servants at this point, have their concerns. Much to their credit, they should be applauded for everything they've been doing so far at every level of government and public service for those going out there and doing their jobs. But again, why add one more hurdle for them to have to overcome in this process? And certainly, you don't want to leave any doubt either. When the election process is over, would there have been any doubt if turnout was higher? Would this candidate have won, or did things not act properly because we didn't have enough time to set up or the proper staff in place? So moving it back, I think, removes all that doubt.
Vince, why did lawmakers agree on moving the primary to June 2nd? Anything significant about that particular date?
It just seems to be the date that most of the states have been choosing. Several other states have chosen June 2nd as the date as well. I think it gives them a whole, a month plus additional time to not only make sure that the virus is under control, the health crisis is under control, but also enough time for counties and local governments and school districts who are dealing with a number of problems and issues to move past that and prepare to set up for an election.
Vince, you said that Pennsylvania has joined a list of states moving their primary. About how many other states are, in fact, moving their primary?
I don't have an exact list off the top of my head, but I would probably say we're up to probably 4 or 5 right now. I know several states in the South have moved theirs, and others are considering it. I think we saw what happened in Ohio, where you had the governor actually shutting down the polling places. We didn't want to get into a situation such as that, where it was a time-sensitive decision. I think making the decision now with several weeks out from the process was the wise decision.
So lawmakers are on board with moving the primary election. What are the governor's intentions when the bill finally comes to his desk to move the primary to June 2nd?
I think he fully intends to sign it and move forward.
So let's talk about so-called voting reforms that have taken place, Vince. In other words, there have been certain changes to voting that are supposed to make voting easier for Pennsylvanians. And for example, mail-in ballots for all voters are now going to be permitted now. How much might they come into play if the primaries move to June 2nd?
Oh, I think very much so. I think that there'll be a big factor. I think that the mail-in ballot was going to be a factor regardless in this year's election, the primary and the general, something new that we haven't had in Pennsylvania before. So I think, candidates and campaigns and political consultants have all been coming up with new ways, looking at other states, how they've handled the situation. not only to assure their candidate wins, but again, to also ensure the integrity of the process, as well as ensuring that as many voters participate in the election as possible. So certainly that's going to have an impact. Every candidate wants to maximize the turnout for their supporters. Every party wants to maximize the turnout for their registered voters in their party. At the same time, we have to make sure there's integrity in the process. So I think that's always a fine line. And when it comes to elections, especially when you have a diverse state as Pennsylvania, where you have some very rural areas of the state, very crowded urban areas of the state, we want to make sure that everyone votes fairly, and the process has integrity.
Vince, here's another change in our election procedure that would interest Pennsylvanians. Straight party voting is now abolished. So what about that effect on voters who no doubt have a routine when they go in to vote?
Yeah, that's going to be probably the biggest effect, I think, coming into this year's election. A lot of folks aren't aware that this is happening, so they're going to look for that. We used to call it the straight party lever, but now it's a straight party button or oval to fill in, and so it's going to be interesting to see how people react to polls. And it all depends on which party you're from, and more importantly, which part of the state you're from. I remember back in 2001, I was on a task force appointed by Governor Ridge to look into some election reforms, and this is one of the questions that was on the issue is, are we going to remove the straight party lever? And as Republicans, they thought this is a great thing because we won't have the big numbers coming out of the cities the big deficits coming out of the cities that we always have. But we received the Republican Party received a huge feedback from our commissioners and elected officials in the middle part of the state saying, wait a minute, this is going to affect us just as much as it affects others. We don't want it either. So it came as a bit of a surprise. So I think if you are certainly a minority party, whether you're a Republican running in a Democratic district or a Democrat running in a Republican district, this plays to your advantage. You're not going to have people going in and just strictly pulling that lever. I think one of the unfortunate circumstances is going to be you may have a lot of what we call ballot fatigue, where people drop off the ballot, stop voting the farther down you go. Hopefully that's not the case. So again, it's up to the campaigns to do a better job of educating the voters, letting them know there are races other than president or the row offices or Congress. There are certainly many important races for state Senate and state House on the ballot, and you need to go down and vote for each of those offices.
So Vince, tell me more about ballot fatigue. In other words, the more complicated or the longer the ballot gets, the more likely voters are just going to discontinue and drop out.
Right, yeah. This is a presidential year, and I always say the presidential year is kind of like a Super Bowl effect. You may not be a football fan, but on Super Bowl Sunday, everybody's watching TV and going to root for one team or the other. Well, in presidential elections, you may not be a regular voter, you might not be in tune to politics, but by November of this year, you're going to be pretty much in tune to who you're voting for president. You're going to come out and vote. So people are going to be anxious to go out and vote for whether it's Donald Trump and most likely going to be Joe Biden on the other side, who they're going to vote for. But when they get in, they're going to realize there's a lot more folks on the ballot that they need to vote for. And, they may not do that. They may not be interested in that. So where they may have gone in before or been asked by their party to go in and just vote, for one party, push that button or fill in that oval, now they're going to be asked to go down one by one. And I still think you're going to have a lot of straight party voters because each party has their rock-solid supporters that are going to be loyal to the party. But you do have a lot of voters that are just going to come out and vote for President Trump or for the Democratic nominee, if it's Joe Biden, whoever it is. And it'd be interesting to see how much drop-off we have from that presidential spot all the way down to the state House races. So,
Vince, let's go back to the moving of Pennsylvania's primary. At least lawmakers have voted at this point to move it from April 28th to June 2nd. The governor is likely to sign that bill. So let's go on a little farther and consider the impact of Pennsylvania in June. You've heard the complaints about Pennsylvania not being relevant in April. What about if we wait until June to help nominate a Democrat?
Well, I think there's two ways of looking at it. One is a lot of states are pushing back their primary, so the dynamics themselves aren't going to change that much because all of the states are moving. It looks like moving their primaries back. So the timing of the coronation of the Democratic nominee may somewhat be in doubt. But however, I think most people realize at this point it's probably a done deal anyway. It looks like Joe Biden is heading towards victory, barring some kind of tremendous comeback by Bernie Sanders or maybe a huge draft another candidate movement coming out of the coronavirus situation. But, I think most people feel that the situation is probably settled anyway. But, moving back to June certainly makes our presidential primary less relevant. But we've seen in recent years, even before moving this back, there's been complaints of Pennsylvania's primary not playing a role. However, it very much played a role in the Obama-Hillary Clinton primaries. It certainly played a role in assuring President Trump got the nomination for the Republican Party. Even when we were one of the later states to begin with, it still mattered. So there's an argument to keep Pennsylvania where it is, and we have a pretty heavy hammer to wield when those primaries are close coming down the stretch.
Vince, one more question. Row offices in Congress are at stake in our primary election, and now, given that it's being delayed 2 months, is it going to be more difficult for voters to pay proper attention to them?
Well, I think it's difficult to begin with cutting through this environment right now. Candidates are in a very difficult situation as far as, how much do you campaign and not campaign in the situation. You certainly don't want to politicize, a health crisis, but parties and candidates are doing that anyway. The most delicate situation is raising money. Do you raise money during this time period? You have to run a campaign, so you have to raise money. So I think people understand that, but you need to be cautious of how you act and how you proceed. So it's going to be very difficult to break through this message and who does it properly. I believe the incumbents have a huge advantage in this situation because really as an incumbent, you need to lead and do your job. And if you do that, you'll get credit for it. Even if you make bad decisions during this process, I think you still, the first part of leadership is lead. And I think people are looking for people to lead in the situation. And if an incumbent does the right thing and acts properly, they would have an advantage in these situations if they have a primary opponent. However, it does give candidates who otherwise may have gotten off to a slow start or maybe entered the race late, having these few extra weeks, this extra month, gives them time to get around to their districts, raise a little bit of extra money, raise some name ID, so they can use the time to their advantage as well.
Thank you, Vince Galko, Senior Vice President at Mercury Public Relations.
Thanks, Larry. Have a great day. More
coronavirus impact after a short break.
After a great victory over Union forces in June 1863, Robert E. Lee marches his army to Pennsylvania. The advancing Confederates clash with General Meade's Union Army at Gettysburg, beginning the most famous battle of the Civil War. Explore our nation's past and the Gettysburg battlefield with the Gettysburg Collection. Become a member to stream the library online. Learn more at gettysburgcollection.com.
Take a nostalgic look back at some of the best games PCN has televised over the past 20 years with PCN Sports Classics. Watch the entire game without interruption and get updates on key players and coaches who have made Pennsylvania sports history. Watch new episodes monthly and stream the full series on demand with the PCN Select streaming service. Visit PCNTV.com to subscribe. PCN, proud to bring Pennsylvania sports to you.
We have on the phone Senator Anthony Williams, Democrat from Delaware County and Philadelphia. Welcome to our program.
Thanks for having me on.
Senator, schools remain closed. Kids are required to go to school for 180 days, however. What's the latest?
Well, there are a few things. The extension is probably not determined in terms of how long students will be required to do that. So even though the governor has put out a date certain, I think we're all quite clear that, unfortunately, we're not quite clear how the virus will continue to manifest itself, especially with today's numbers of over 500 new cases being reported. So my expectation is that schools will continue to be closed and operate in the manner that they are. In Philadelphia, they're doing, I guess, all they can to get new technology out through sending it home to families that currently don't have the ability to go online. And then further, the legislature passed a bill that would allow us to make sure that we're going to be reimbursing our school districts so they will not be shortchanged in terms of their funding for this year.
At this point, Senator, is there any idea how long we'll extend kids not having to attend school? They're going to be closed next week. What about after that? Is there any discussion yet?
There is discussion every day with Secretary Levine with regard to the current status in terms of quality of health. The virus will dictate how long we will be in this pattern of schools remaining open, as opposed to us knowing specifically when a school would reopen.
Is there anything lawmakers can do right now to continue educating kids while they're at home?
I think making sure that online services are more accessible. There are parts of Pennsylvania which has revealed to us that, particularly rural Pennsylvania, which doesn't have service at all. So that means those children will not be able to get access to quality education. And certainly those who are of a modest income who can't afford online services, we should be demanding that companies that can provide online service should do so without cost and making accessibility available to all students that can have it because they have the ability to have online services. I think that the governor's office has done an outstanding job to communicate with the business sector with regard to that demand and certainly that need. And if we have to do more, we will.
Besides school attendance, what other school-related issues should your caucus consider at this point?
Well, I think that they've all considered issues such as which I mentioned. That is, how does this pandemic define how we go forward with educating our students? That after this is over, what have we learned by this interruption? The fact that Philadelphia School District had to shut down, not because it chose to, but because the population of employees were significantly in Montgomery County. I think that caught many people off guard. What do we do about that going forward with regard to teachers and, the confluence of where they live and how we secure substitute teachers, et cetera? The fact that so many students in Philadelphia cannot access online learning and some parts of Delaware County as well should not have surprised us, but did, and underscores a glaring problem that we don't have all the resources in place to support us. And then ultimately, we are, our teaching population is in transition as it is. There are a number of teachers who will be retiring, I guess, in the next X number of years, which will put our teacher shortage even greater. And so those things are sort of teaching us lessons that we need to prepare for as we come out of this current situation.
What can lawmakers do in general to help check the spread of coronavirus?
Well, I think, screaming from every possible platform that the most common sense things that one can do is what we should be doing. There's nothing new that we learn beyond, social distancing, staying at home, making sure you're cleaning off surfaces, washing your hands. The most important, though, that seems to be the hardest is that as the weather gets better, people still return to their old habits because they maybe have been cooped up and, walk around much closer than they should be, socializing and connecting in ways that we would not want them to. The stay-at-home order has been effective in large part, but there's still ways to go with some people who don't recognize or respect the fact that the governor has said, look, shut your business if it's not essential too. And of course, for all of us, understand something. When he says close your business, it's not essential. He doesn't say it from the standpoint of we don't care that we know you're going to go through a financial crisis. He doesn't say it because he doesn't recognize that some households are constructed that they have to have some parent leave because they are essential in nature. But he's saying that to most of us who can comply, we need to comply because without complying, the virus will continue to spread because even those who do not have symptoms will spread the virus without knowing that they're spreading the symptoms. And hopefully, I want to underscore this. For those who are listening, it is not an old people's disease. There are young people who are unfortunately who have now been contaminated who've died. So we do not know exactly how this virus will continue to ravage all age groups. But we're quite clear it's very deadly when you contract it, and we do not want it to continue to spread. So staying at home is the most significant thing that I guess we can all, as public officials, continue to say, however many times we say it.
Well, Senator, you've been talking about general advice for the general population, staying at home and social distancing, and we know those are good things. But again, in your role as a legislator, let me put it this way. Is there some kind of special funding that you'd like to put into effect soon that we need right away?
Well, I think that from the standpoint of after this has abated or declined, as catastrophic as the virus has been to our health and to those who've died, and our condolences go to those who have a loved one who's passed, the economy will compromise even more people. And so to the extent that we're talking about funding, the governor has put in place a package, $60 million, I believe it is, for small businesses, and the federal government has passed its $2 trillion support, which covers a variety of areas. Within that space, I'm concerned about small business that does not have a banking relationship. So for all the loans and for all the money that may directly go to someone's household, there still be a category in space of, say, hairdressers, barbershops, bars, nailers. Those are all businesses which are very significant in parts of our economy and employ a lot of people in neighborhoods that, frankly, do not have banking relationships. I want to make sure that they get the benefit of, the same support that a traditional small business would in a similar manner, regardless of the fact that they don't necessarily have the traditional banking relationships.
Senator, what kind of medical equipment does Pennsylvania need? We've all heard about the crisis in New York City about ventilators.
Yeah, so we are no different than any other state that is short of ventilators, short of masks, short of goggles, short of the covering that the healthcare workers need. And in fact, at some point in time, we're going to run into a crisis of healthcare workers being a shortage of them as well, because some of them are sick, and will make decisions about whether they're able to come to work or not. And so we are not New York, but when you see a 500-person spike within one day in Pennsylvania, that should draw serious concern to where we're headed with this virus. And it's been told that we're going to head in this direction. It's been told by the governor. It's been told by many public officials. It's been told by Dr. Levine, who is our Secretary of Health. It's been told by everyone that we should expect that we have not seen the worst, and therefore we should be doing what makes sense, and that is staying out of the area that the virus can affect us. But when it comes to our healthcare workers and those people who are front line, unfortunately, we are going to continue to see shortages unless I guess the President of the United States decides to enact what they did before during World War, I think it was World War II, when they required manufacturers in the United States to all change with their manufacturing and then direct it towards those areas which we are in short need of or high demand of. And I would hope that he would pay attention to that request by many of us.
One more question I'd like to ask you, Senator, has to do with unemployment compensation. About how many Pennsylvanians are filing for this benefit?
I don't have the new number in front of me. It's literally thousands. We broke a record. I think it was 4,000 was the number I saw the other day. We have far exceeded the amount of claimants that we traditionally have ever had in Pennsylvania. We're calling back retirees who've done this work on our behalf because we had to close some of our offices because they were overwhelmed with the request for the applications. We're now opening the process back up, and we're manning it with additional personnel so that we can process these claims. The expectation is that the demand will continue to be significant, but then hopefully in the next couple of weeks it will abate and in fact decline. That will not remove the fact that people are still unemployed significantly.
Senator, just one more question, and we're running out of time. If someone files for unemployment compensation today, about how long will it take for them to get a check?
It takes about, I believe, a couple of weeks. But I can't tell you based upon this current set of circumstances when so many people are filing. So I don't want to give false hope to people in terms of that process. But to date, it's the average time period that we've been reported. So that has not been interrupted as long as the application goes in and is processed in the normal traditional way. That timing should remain the same.
All right. Thank you, Senator Anthony Williams, Democrat from Delaware County and Philadelphia.
Thank you.
More coronavirus impact after a short break.
PCN offers Pennsylvania organizations, business, and associations the opportunity to have their message telecast statewide. Fusion on PCN is a platform for you to reach out to all of Pennsylvania using our statewide cable network and online streaming. You produce the content with your message and PCN delivers it statewide. Fusion is a partnership that helps expand your reach and meet objectives through an alliance with PCN.
Go to pcntv.com/fusion for more information. Tired of unbalanced views and networks pushing their own angles? PCN brings it to you straight. We don't edit what was said to fit a point of view. We bring you the entire event. No slant, no editing, the whole story. A complete view without the angle. Watch PCN on cable and on the PCN app. Stream politics and policy on your favorite device for free.
We have on the phone PA Adjutant General Anthony Carrelli. Welcome to our program.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Thank you. I appreciate you having me on today.
What's the National Guard's role in dealing with the outbreak?
Of course, you know, the National Guard is a state agency. We're commanded by the governor, and we're at the governor's disposal. You know, 19,000 plus guards have been here in Pennsylvania. We're the second largest guard state in the nation, and we are fully integrated with PEMA. We have a number of people working at PEMA now, and you know, as the different projects and requirements come in to PEMA through the emergency process, they're sourced out to different agencies of the state government, whether it's the state police, the Department of Health, Human Services. Some of those come to the National Guard and say, hey, here's a mission for the National Guard. Can you fulfill this? So our planners get on it. We call people in. We put them on state active duty, and we go to the source of that and perform those missions. So we're at the governor's disposal, and we've been fairly active over the last couple of weeks, as you can imagine, and it continues to ramp up. Essentially, we have just over 600 guardsmen on duty as of today.
So, General, try to give me some specific examples. Exactly what have you been doing?
Okay, so early on, for instance, the cruise ship that everyone saw on the news, you know, that docked in California, those passengers were quarantined for a certain period, and then they had to be returned to their states. Well, 39 of those were Pennsylvania citizens, and they had no way of getting them back. So that was one of the missions that was passed to the National Guard. Mm-hmm. So we had those essentially all landed in Harrisburg, and we had a cell of guardsmen in transportation vehicles that were able to then transport safely all of those passengers to their homes. There was no other way to get there. Obviously, public transportation isn't a good idea at this point, so we had to arrange a safe manner to prevent further spread. So we took on that mission. We accomplished that mission about a week ago.
General, which parts of Pennsylvania did you have to take these passengers to? Just how spread out were you geographically?
They were all over. As you can imagine, it's the random sampling of people that happened to be on vacation from Pennsylvania. So I think we went as far as Erie and Pittsburgh, and some of the missions were only about an hour's drive from Harrisburg, and somewhere in the Harrisburg area, fortunately. But some of the furthest missions, obviously, we went all the way out to Erie, and of course all the way at the other end out to Philadelphia. So just a random sampling, and that's where Pennsylvanians are from. So wherever it was required, that's where we went.
So these passengers are home and presumably still in quarantine?
Yes, I believe they were to go home and begin a 14 days, so they're probably most of the way through that at this point, maybe a few days left.
Now, try to tell me if there's a typical day at this point, General. In other words, is the National Guard helping Governor Wolf with his orders to shut down non-essential businesses?
No, we have not been called for that. You know, there was a running concern really throughout the nation, and we see some of that in Pennsylvania too. And our public affairs office has been trying to put that word out that people are fearful of martial law and things like that. And the governor's made it very plain that he is restricting access. He's he closed the schools, he's closing businesses, he's asking people to stay at home because that's the best thing to prevent this spread, to keep people out of the community. But he has used the state police and local law enforcement to go out there and give warnings, and of course, if they must, they're allowed to issue citations to do that. And people hesitate. They say, well, the governor's calling the guard, and they're going to do a martial law, and that's not been the case. I mean, the National Guard in Pennsylvania and the governor is the leader of that. We're here to help with the emergency. We're here to support our communities. We're not here to do law enforcement.
So tell me more about the specific things you have been doing for state agencies, and obviously transportation was essential for getting those quarantined passengers off of that contaminated ship.
Yes, of course, we've been supporting the Department of Health and Human Services with the efforts because they just didn't have enough staff to do all the things that they wanted to do. So early on, they wanted to set up community testing sites. And, of course, from the very beginning, a testing site was set up in Montgomery County and Philadelphia County about a week ago. And Department of Health just didn't have enough people, and the governor asked us to do that mission. So we own the Montgomery testing site as far as the manning of it. The Montgomery County Emergency Management is in charge. Their Montgomery County Department of Health is running the operation, but we provided all the manpower to run that testing site. So we have approximately 60 to 70 guardsmen at that site. Have been there for a number of approaching a week now. I think we've had done 1,631 total tests as of yesterday, but that was given to us to man that site. We also have some transportation missions in the Harrisburg area. Department of Health medical supplies, whether it's equipment, whether it's actual drugs and things like that, that were coming in from all different kinds of sources, needed to be distributed out, and it put a tasking on the normal distribution chain. So the governor asked us to use some of our logistical capabilities, and we have been working in those warehouse locations to distribute that. So, however we can help, the governor asked, and we're more than happy to pitch in with all our resources to help Pennsylvania. It's a unique thing. The National Guard. Yes, we're military. In the Pennsylvania National Guard, we're members of the Air Force. We're members of the Army. But we live in the community. We're not like the active duty force. We grow up here. We raise our kids here. We go to school here. Our civilian jobs are here. So this is where we live too. So helping in the community it goes along hand in hand. We're all in this together. We also live in these communities. So we benefit when the community benefits, and we're happy to help.
About how many Pennsylvanians have been mobilized in the National Guard to help with this crisis?
So currently we have about just over 600 on duty, performing some of the missions that I just talked about, and then we have a number of other planners tied to the Department of Health, tied to PEMA, tied to some other agencies, helping with some of this emergency planning. As you've probably heard in some of the news conferences by the governor or even Secretary Levine, we're looking for some additional medical capacity. We're working closely with the Army Corps of Engineers and, of course, with our National Guard planners to talk about how we would do that. What are the locations? What kind of help would they need? Logistics, the capabilities of the National Guard as far as logistics, moving equipment, massing huge amounts of manpower. We're very good at that, and the governor understands that and has us on call to essentially help plan those missions and execute them when they come up.
One more question, General. With rapidly changing conditions, what's the next stage of readiness for the National Guard? What do you have to anticipate?
Well, we just don't. We know this is going to get worse before it gets better, and we're trying to prevent the community spread right now. But we need to also keep as many of our members safe as we can, because we know we're going to be calling more of them later. So a number of our members are in the community just doing a self-quarantine, observing all the restrictions, because we know it might be only a matter of days or a week or 2 weeks before they get a call. We also have a fair number. We have over 1,000 of our guardsmen right now that are still on call to deploy federally overseas to support our Department of Defense missions, and they're continuing their training. So some of them are deploying as early as 2 months from now. So they are still coming in because they still need to train and they need to be prepared, because they need to go out and defend our nation overseas as well. So we still have our federal mission as well as mixed in with this new state mission to affect relief operations in Pennsylvania wherever and whenever we can.
All right, that's all the time we have. Thank you, PA Adjutant General Anthony Carrelli.
Okay, appreciate your time. Thank you.
That's it for Coronavirus Impact. Join us weekdays at 12 noon and 8 p.m. You can also watch us on our mobile app, PCNTV.com, Facebook, and YouTube. I'm Larry Casper. Thanks for watching.